My name is Elizabeth, I'm 67 years old, and I never thought my only son would betray me like this. After not seeing Thomas for 2 years, I arrived at his Colorado home with homemade cookies and handmade gifts, so excited to reconnect. His wife Nancy greeted me with that familiar cold smile before Thomas led me to my accommodations, a musty basement beside their German Shepherd's kennel. When I heard the lock click from the outside, I realized this wasn't just rudeness. It was imprisonment. If you've ever felt disrespected by family, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear what happened next that left them completely speechless. Life before this horrible visit had settled into a quiet routine. After losing my husband Harold to cancer 5 years ago, I'd adjusted to living alone in our modest Ohio home where we'd raised Thomas. Retirement from 35 years of elementary school teaching gave me time for gardening, book club, and volunteering at the local library. Still, there was always that Thomas-shaped hole in my heart. I raised that boy on my own after his father abandoned us when Thomas was just 3 years old. We were a team, the two of us against the world. I worked 2 jobs to put food on the table while finishing my teaching degree at night. Thomas was such a good child, helping with chores without complaint, understanding when I couldn't attend every baseball game, and studying hard to make me proud. We had our struggles with tight budgets and small apartments, but we had love and respect. Everything changed when Thomas met Nancy during his junior year at college. The accounting program I'd sacrificed so much to pay for introduced him to the ambitious, stylish business major from a wealthy Connecticut family. Their romance was fast and intense. Within 6 months, Thomas called to announce their engagement, sounding oddly nervous rather than joyful. From the beginning, Nancy made me uneasy. During our first meeting at a restaurant near campus, she barely asked me questions, constantly checked her phone, and made subtle comments about Thomas upgrading his life. When I brought homemade apple pie to their small engagement celebration, Nancy told guests she couldn't imagine living without a professional kitchen, while setting my dessert aside untouched. After their wedding, which her parents paid for at an exclusive vineyard I could barely afford to travel to, Thomas began changing. Our weekly Sunday calls became monthly, then quarterly. He missed our traditional Christmas together for the first time to visit Nancy's family in Aspen. When I sent care packages, my thank you texts were delayed and brief. The Thomas who once wrote me heartfelt birthday cards now sent him personal gift cards with pre-printed messages. So when Thomas called last month saying, "Mom, we'd love for you to visit for a week," I was overjoyed. Perhaps Nancy had softened. Perhaps Thomas missed our connection. I spent days preparing, baking his favorite cookies, knitting a sweater in his preferred blue, framing old photos of us together, and planning activities we might enjoy. I withdrew $400 from my modest savings for gifts, and treating them to dinner as a thank you for hosting me. The journey from Ohio to Colorado was exhausting for my arthritic knees. A connecting flight with a long layover, then an expensive taxi ride to their suburban Denver neighborhood. But seeing Thomas's face would make it worthwhile. I arrived at their impressive 2-story house with manicured lawn around 4 in the afternoon, my heart pounding with excitement. Thomas answered the door looking handsome in his banker's clothes but oddly tense. He hugged me briefly, nothing like the bear hugs of his youth. Nancy appeared behind him, perfectly styled as always, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Elizabeth, welcome," she said, using my first name despite my previous gentle requests to be called Mom or even Mrs. Harris. "I hope your flight wasn't too tedious." As they led me through their home, I complimented their tasteful furniture and decor, noticing family photos displayed that included Nancy's parents and siblings, but none with me. In the kitchen, Nancy pointed to a typed paper on the refrigerator. "We run a tight ship here," she explained, gesturing to what appeared to be house rules. "Breakfast at 6:30, dinner at 7 sharp. We're both busy professionals, so quiet hours between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. The cleaning service comes Tuesday, so best to stay out of their way. Oh, and please check with me before using the kitchen. I just had it remodeled and I'm particular about my appliances." Thomas stood silently beside her, examining his watch rather than meeting my eyes. I nodded politely, though the rules seemed extreme for a family visit. I'd assumed I'd be helping with meals and spending quality time together, not navigating a rulebook. "Let me show you where you'll be staying," Thomas finally said, picking up my suitcase. I followed him, expecting to be led to a guest room, but instead, he opened a door revealing stairs to the basement. We thought you might prefer the privacy, Nancy added from behind us. Thomas's home office is now in the guest room, and we didn't want to disrupt his work schedule. The basement was finished but barely. A fold-out couch had been made up with mismatched linens. A small lamp provided inadequate light for the windowless space. A single nightstand held a digital alarm clock. The concrete floor had an old area rug that smelled faintly of mildew. Most disturbingly, a door on the far wall led to a utility room where their German shepherd, Kaiser, began barking at our entrance. Bathrooms through there, Thomas pointed to a small door. It's a half bath, but there's a shower attachment on the sink if you need it. For a proper shower, you can use the guest bathroom upstairs when we're at work, Nancy added. Just be sure to use your own towels and toiletries that you brought. I forced a smile, not wanting to seem ungrateful. This will be fine, thank you. Great, Nancy said, checking her phone. We'll call you when dinner's ready. About 3 hours. They turned to leave, and I sat on the edge of the uncomfortable pull-out bed, telling myself not to overreact. Then I heard it, the distinct sound of a lock clicking into place from the other side of the door. For several seconds I sat frozen in disbelief. Surely I had misheard. My son wouldn't possibly lock me in a basement. I walked to the door and gently turned the knob. It didn't budge. I knocked lightly. Thomas? The door seems to be locked, I called, keeping my voice steady. Silence. Thomas? Nancy? Hello. I knocked louder this time. Footsteps approached and Nancy's voice came through the door. Sorry about that, Elizabeth. Force of habit. We always lock that door because of Kaiser. You understand. But the door remained locked. Could you open it, please? I asked, my heart beginning to race. Actually, Kaiser gets very anxious with new people wandering around. It's best if you just text when you need something, and we'll come get you. But I don't have your numbers in my phone, I replied, my voice rising slightly. Thomas will text you, she responded, footsteps already retreating. I pulled out my ancient flip phone, realizing with sinking heart that text messaging was difficult with its numeric keypad, and I had barely 1 bar of cell reception in this concrete basement. I tried calling Thomas's number, but the call wouldn't connect. As the reality of my situation sank in, Kaiser began barking again from behind his door, the sound echoing against the basement walls. I sat back on the bed, hands trembling. How had my relationship with my son deteriorated to this point? Was I truly such a burden that I needed to be locked away? From upstairs, I could hear muffled voices growing louder. Thomas and Nancy were arguing. I moved to the bottom of the stairs, straining to hear. This is ridiculous, Nancy. She's my mother, Thomas was saying, though his tone lacked conviction. We agreed on boundaries, Thomas. Your mother has always been too intrusive, calling all the time, sending packages we don't need. You said yourself she tries to make you feel guilty for living your own life. I never said to lock her in the basement. It's not locking her in, it's establishing clear boundaries. She has her space, we have ours. You know how she wanders around looking at everything, asking personal questions. I can't deal with that scrutiny right now with the promotion coming up. But if you undo this now, you'll undo 3 years of progress we've made in separating from her apron strings. Remember how she showed up unannounced at our apartment during finals week? How she redecorated our first kitchen without asking. This is healthier for everyone. A long pause followed, then Thomas's defeated sigh. Fine. But we'll bring her a nice dinner at least. 2 hours later, the lock clicked again. Thomas appeared with a paper plate containing a small portion of lasagna and a plastic fork. No napkin, no drink, no side salad. Nancy stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed. Here you go, Mom. Sorry we can't all eat together tonight. Nancy's parents are video calling during dinner to discuss their anniversary party. I looked at the plate, then at my son's avoiding eyes. Thomas, why am I locked in your basement? He glanced back at Nancy, who gave an almost imperceptible headshake. It's not like that, Mom. It's just easier with Kaiser and everything. We'll revisit the arrangement tomorrow. May I at least use the upstairs bathroom? This one doesn't have a proper shower, And I've been traveling all day. Another glance at Nancy, another subtle signal. Maybe tomorrow morning when we're getting ready for work, he mumbled. The water pressure isn't great when multiple bathrooms are in use. After they left locking the door again, I sat in the semi-darkness, picking at the cold pasta. Kaiser had started barking again. A mournful sound that matched my mood. I'd been reduced to a nuisance, an unwanted visitor locked away with the dog. The night was miserable. The basement grew cold, but the single thin blanket provided little warmth. The fold-out bed's metal bar dug into my back. Kaiser's occasional barking startled me whenever I drifted toward sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I needed to use the bathroom but discovered the small half-bath had no working light, forcing me to use my phone's dim glow to find my way. Morning brought no relief. A knock at 7 a.m. was followed by the door opening just wide enough for Thomas to slide in a paper cup of coffee and a granola bar. Sorry, busy morning. Nancy has an early meeting, and I'm dropping her off before heading to the bank. We'll probably be out all day. Nancy wants to show me potential venues for her company retreat. There's sandwich stuff in the mini fridge in the corner if you get hungry. I hadn't even noticed the small refrigerator, partially hidden behind a stack of storage boxes. Thomas, this isn't right. I can't stay down here locked up like a prisoner. He checked his watch nervously. Mom, please don't make this difficult. It's just for a few days until you get used to our routine. Nancy's really stressed about work right now, and having someone new in our space is challenging for her. But I'm not someone new. I'm your mother. His face clouded, and for a moment, I saw conflict in his eyes. Then Nancy called from upstairs, Thomas, we're going to be late. Gotta go, he said, backing toward the door. Text if you need anything urgent. The reception is terrible down here, I reminded him. Right. Well, we'll check in when we get home. The door closed, the lock clicked, and he was gone. Through the tiny basement window near the ceiling, I could see car wheels pulling out of the driveway. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. This wasn't the reunion I'd imagined. While searching the mini fridge for lunch later that day, I discovered something that broke my heart completely. A folded paper had fallen behind the fridge, perhaps dropped during its stocking. I unfolded it to find a handwritten list titled Mother-in-Law Rules, in Nancy's precise handwriting. 1. Limit all interactions to 30 minutes max. 2. No discussions about money, our careers, or future plans. 3. No reminiscing about Thomas's childhood. 4. No unsolicited advice or opinions. 5. Keep her occupied in basement as much as possible. 6. No discussions about having children. 7. No allowing her to redecorate or reorganize anything. 8. Thomas must check with me before agreeing to any of her suggestions. 9. No inviting her back until at least next year. The list continued with more restrictions, each one a dagger to my heart. This wasn't just rudeness or boundaries. This was a calculated plan to isolate me from my son's life completely. I sat on the edge of the fold-out bed, the mother-in-law rules trembling in my hands as a lifetime of memories flashed through my mind. I remembered holding newborn Thomas in the hospital, alone because his father had already begun disappearing for days at a time. I remembered working night shifts at the diner, so I could be home when Thomas returned from school. I remembered skipping meals so he could have new baseball cleats, selling my mother's jewelry to pay for his college application fees, and driving our unreliable car 12 hours to move him into his dorm. All those sacrifices, all that love, and here I was locked in a basement, treated worse than their dog. Kaiser at least had scheduled walks and proper food bowls. Something shifted inside me in that moment. The hurt transformed into clarity. I had spent decades putting everyone else first, my students, my husband during his illness, and always Thomas. But I deserved basic human dignity. I deserved respect. I wiped my tears and stood up straighter. I may be 67, but I was not helpless. 35 years of teaching had given me problem-solving skills and patience. It was time to use them. First, I examined my surroundings more carefully. The basement had one small window near the ceiling, likely designed as an emergency exit. It appeared to have a latch but was potentially big enough for me to fit through. I dragged a storage box beneath it and tested my weight. The box held. Standing on tiptoes, I could just reach the window latch. It was stiff but not locked. Next, I took inventory of my resources. I had my purse containing my wallet, phone, and medications. I had the clothes in my suitcase. And most importantly, I had Nancy's damning list of rules. A plan began forming in my mind. Not a plan of revenge, but of self-respect. I wasn't going to scream or make a scene when they returned. I wasn't going to beg or plead. I was going to take action that would force them to see me as a person worthy of dignity. I listened carefully for any sounds from upstairs, confirming the house was empty. Then I pulled the storage box under the window again and climbed up. The window was stiff but open with some effort. Fresh air rushed in, along with the sound of neighborhood children playing nearby. Freedom was literally within reach. With considerable effort and ignoring the protest of my arthritic knees, I managed to pull myself up and through the window. It was undignified, and I scraped my arm on the way out, but I landed on the side lawn with a mixture of triumph and heartbreak. I had just escaped from my own son's house like a prisoner. I brushed grass from my clothes and walked around to the front of the house, taking one long look at its perfect exterior that hid such cruelty. Then I began walking down the suburban street, purse clutched tightly, Nancy's list safely tucked inside. My plan wasn't to run away permanently. It was to re-establish my position from a place of strength rather than victimhood. First, though, I needed allies and resources. About half a mile from Thomas's house, I found a small shopping center with a coffee shop. My knees were aching from the walk, but the pain felt insignificant compared to the wound of betrayal. Inside, I ordered a cup of tea and asked for the Wi-Fi password. My first call was to my dear friend Sandra back in Ohio. We taught at the same elementary school for 20 years, and she knew Thomas from childhood. They did what? Sandra's outrage through the phone speaker caused nearby customers to glance my way. Elizabeth, that's elder abuse. That's illegal. You should call the police right now. I don't want to get Thomas in legal trouble, I explained, though part of me appreciated her protective fury. But I won't be treated this way either. What are you going to do? Do you need money for a flight home? I can wire you something right away. Actually, I have a different plan, I told her, the details crystallizing as I spoke. I need to teach them both a lesson about respect without destroying my relationship with my son forever. Whatever you need, I'm here, Sandra promised. After hanging up, I made several more calls. First to my bank, confirming I could access emergency funds from my modest savings. Then to a local hotel, securing a room for 3 nights. Then, most difficult of all, to Nancy's parents. I'd only met William and Patricia Baker a handful of times at the wedding and one tense Thanksgiving dinner, but I'd maintained Christmas card contact out of maternal duty. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring, surprise evident in her voice. Elizabeth? What a pleasant surprise. Are you calling about the anniversary party invitations? We just sent them yesterday. Actually, Patricia, I'm in Denver visiting Thomas and Nancy. Something has happened that I think you should know about. I proceeded to tell her everything, my voice steady and factual. I finished by reading Nancy's list of rules. The silence that followed was profound. I simply can't believe Nancy would do such a thing, Patricia finally said, her voice strained. William and I raised her better than that. I have the list in her handwriting, I said simply. I'm not calling to cause family discord, but I wanted you to understand why I'll be taking certain actions. What will you do? She asked quietly. Address the situation directly, with witnesses present. I'd welcome your presence if you're willing. Not to attack Nancy, but to ensure this pattern doesn't continue. Another long pause. We'll be there. Text us the details. My next calls were to Rachel and Martin, friends of mine who had relocated to Denver 3 years ago and had attended Thomas's wedding. They were horrified by my story and immediately offered their guest room, but I explained my need for neutral territory in the hotel first. They agreed to accompany me back to Thomas's house as witnesses and support. My final research was less pleasant but necessary. I used the coffee shop's Wi-Fi to look up Colorado laws regarding elder abuse and mistreatment. I had no intention of filing charges, but knowledge is power. What Nancy and Thomas had done imprisoning me in the basement, could potentially have serious legal consequences. This wasn't about revenge. It was about establishing that their behavior was not just hurtful but potentially criminal. By late afternoon, my plan was set. I checked into the modest hotel room, took a long shower in a bathroom with functioning lights and clean towels, and waited for the inevitable discovery of my absence. Around 6 p.m., my phone began vibrating with incoming calls from Thomas. I let them go to voicemail. After the fifth call, I received a text. "Mom, where are you? The basement door was locked by accident. Please call immediately." I replied simply, "The basement window wasn't locked. I'll return tomorrow at 2 p.m. to collect my belongings. I'll have friends with me." His response came quickly. "This is a huge misunderstanding. Please come back now so we can talk." "Tomorrow 2 p.m. I repeated, then turned off my phone. For the first time since arriving in Colorado, I slept peacefully. The next morning, I awoke with purpose. After a proper breakfast in the hotel restaurant, I turned my phone back on to find 12 missed calls from Thomas and several increasingly frantic texts. I responded only once. "I am safe. We'll see you at 2 p.m. as planned." Rachel and Martin picked me up at noon, their faces a mixture of concern and protective anger on my behalf. "Are you sure you don't want to just collect your things while they're at work?" Rachel asked. "You could avoid the confrontation entirely." I shook my head. "This isn't about running away. It's about standing my ground with dignity." Our first stop was Thomas's workplace, the regional headquarters of a national bank where he served as a branch manager. I had no intention of getting him fired, but I did need to establish the seriousness of what had occurred. The receptionist recognized me from photos on Thomas's desk and seemed confused by my formal request to speak with his supervisor. Minutes later, I was seated across from Linda Murray, Regional Director of Operations. "Mrs. Harris, what can I do for you today?" she asked, her professional demeanor masking obvious curiosity. "Ms. Murray, I want to be clear that I'm not here to damage my son's career. However, an incident has occurred that I believe reflects on personal judgment in a way that might concern you professionally." I proceeded to explain the basement imprisonment situation factually, without emotional embellishment, showing her Nancy's list as evidence. Linda's expression remained carefully neutral, but her eyes widened slightly at the list. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Mrs. Harris. While this appears to be a personal family matter, the bank does have standards regarding character and judgment for employees in positions of trust. May I ask what you're hoping to achieve by telling me this?" "Simply awareness," I replied. "And perhaps a meeting with HR about maintaining appropriate boundaries between personal conflicts and professional responsibilities. My son's judgment was severely compromised in this situation, and I worry about other areas where that might manifest." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll handle this discreetly but appropriately. And Mrs. Harris? I'm truly sorry this happened to you." Our next stop was a quick lunch where Patricia and William Baker joined us. Nancy's parents had driven from their home in Boulder immediately after my call. Patricia hugged me tightly, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm absolutely mortified," she said. "William and I had no idea Nancy was capable of such behavior." William, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, shook his head gravely. "We raised her to respect her elders. Something has gone very wrong here." "Nancy has always been somewhat controlling," Patricia admitted as we ate. "But this crosses every line of decency. We'll be addressing this directly with her." At precisely 2 o'clock, our group of 5, myself, Rachel, Martin, Patricia, and William, arrived at Thomas and Nancy's house. I rang the doorbell, standing tall despite my nerves. Thomas opened the door, his face falling in shock as he registered not just my presence but my companion's. "Mom, what is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've come to collect my belongings," I stated calmly. "These friends are here to support me." Before he could respond, Nancy appeared behind him, her expression shifting from annoyance to alarm when she spotted her parents. "Mom? Dad? What are you doing here?" "Supporting Elizabeth," Patricia replied coolly. "May we come in?" Thomas stepped back wordlessly, allowing our group to enter the immaculate living room. Nancy remained frozen, her perfect composure visibly cracking. "This is completely unnecessary," she finally said. "There was a simple misunderstanding about the basement door." I removed the list from my purse and held it up. "Was this a misunderstanding too, Nancy?" The color drained from her face as she recognized her handwriting. Thomas looked confused, then stunned as he took the paper and read it. "Where did you get this?" Nancy demanded. "It was behind the mini-fridge in the basement where you imprisoned me," I replied evenly. "Next to the dog kennel." "Imprisoned is a ridiculous exaggeration," Nancy scoffed, though her voice lacked conviction. Patricia stepped forward. "Nancy Alexandra Baker, is this truly how we raised you to treat family?" "You don't understand," Nancy began, her voice rising. "She's always interfering, always trying to come between Thomas and me." "By visiting once in 2 years?" Martin interjected incredulously. Thomas finally spoke, his voice hollow. "Nancy, did you write these rules?" When she didn't immediately deny it, something shifted in Thomas's expression. "I think we all need to sit down," I suggested, taking control of the situation. Once everyone was seated, Nancy as far from her parents as possible, I spoke clearly and calmly. "I came here excited to reconnect with my son after 2 years of minimal contact. Instead, I was locked in a basement, denied access to proper bathroom facilities, given food on paper plates, and treated worse than your dog. I found this list of rules designed to isolate me completely from your lives." I paused, looking directly at Thomas. "I changed your diapers, nursed you through chickenpox, worked 2 jobs to put food on our table, and sacrificed my own needs for 30 years to give you opportunities. I deserve basic human dignity and respect." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Yet you allowed it," I replied softly. "You locked the door." Nancy interrupted. "This is exactly the guilt tripping I was trying to prevent. You always make him feel terrible about living his own life." "Nancy," William's authoritative voice cut through her protest. "What you've done is not just unkind, it's potentially criminal. Forcible confinement is a serious offense." "Criminal?" Thomas paled visibly. "Mom, you wouldn't press charges?" "I have no desire to see either of you in legal trouble," I assured him. "But I need you both to understand the gravity of your actions." "What do you want from us?" Nancy asked, a defensive edge still in her voice. "Respect," I answered simply. "Not constant contact, not control over your lives, just basic human respect. I won't visit where I'm not welcome, but I won't be treated as less than human when I do." The room fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. Thomas was openly crying now, while Nancy stared at the floor, her body language still defiant but crumbling. "I'll get your things," Thomas finally said, standing. "I'll help you," Rachel offered, following him to ensure nothing was left behind. While they were gone, Nancy abruptly stood and left the room. Moments later, we heard a door slam upstairs. Patricia sighed heavily. "Elizabeth, I cannot apologize enough for my daughter's behavior. This is inexcusable." "Thank you, Patricia," I replied. "I appreciate your support today." When Thomas returned with my suitcase, our eyes met, and I saw genuine remorse in his. "Can we talk privately before you go?" he asked. We stepped onto the back patio while the others waited inside. As soon as the door closed, Thomas broke down completely. "Mom, I'm so ashamed. I don't know how this happened, how I let things go this far. Nancy said you needed clear boundaries, that you were too involved in our lives, but I never meant." "Why, Thomas?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me. "Why would you lock me away like that?" He wiped his eyes, looking more like my vulnerable little boy than the polished banker. "Nancy's been increasingly jealous of our relationship, even the little that remains. She says I change when I talk to you, that I become the mama's boy she doesn't want to be married to. When you accepted our invitation, she had a complete meltdown. The basement was her idea, but I agreed to it. I'm so sorry, Mom. I've been living like this for years, always choosing her happiness over everything else." The revelation was both heartbreaking and illuminating. My son was in an emotionally abusive relationship himself. "Thomas, that's not a healthy marriage," I said gently. "I know," he whispered. "I don't know what to do." I took his hand. "Start by doing what's right, Even when it's difficult. I'll always love you. But I won't enable behavior that diminishes either of us. When we returned inside, Nancy was still absent. Thomas apologized to everyone, especially to Patricia and William, who looked deeply troubled by the entire situation. I think it's best if I don't stay here, I said, gathering my suitcase. Rachel and Martin have offered their guest room. Thomas nodded sadly. I understand. I'll call you tomorrow if that's okay. As we were leaving, I heard Patricia say to Thomas, we need to have a serious conversation about what's been happening in this marriage. In the car, Rachel hugged me tightly. You were magnificent, she said. So dignified and strong. But as we drove away from my son's beautiful house with its ugly secrets, the tears I'd been holding back finally fell. The next day, Thomas called as promised, asking to meet at a cafe near Rachel and Martin's home. When I arrived, he was already there, looking like he hadn't slept, his usual impeccable appearance rumpled and tired. Thank you for coming, he said, standing awkwardly as if unsure whether to hug me. I resolved the question by embracing him briefly before sitting down. How are things at home? I asked directly. Thomas sighed heavily. Complicated. Nancy's parents stayed for hours after you left. They were not gentle with her. Or with me, frankly. They said they were ashamed and disappointed. That must have been difficult, I acknowledged, though part of me felt it was necessary. After they left, Nancy and I had the biggest fight of our marriage. She kept saying I betrayed her by not defending her, that I was choosing you over her. When I pointed out that locking someone in a basement isn't defensible, she got even more upset. He stared into his untouched coffee. She said either you go completely from our lives, or she would reconsider our marriage. When I wouldn't agree to cut you off entirely, she packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. While I felt no joy in their marital troubles, I recognized the manipulation tactic. Thomas, that's not a healthy ultimatum. I know, he replied quietly. Linda from the bank called me into her office this morning too. There's going to be an HR meeting tomorrow about personal judgment and its impact on professional responsibilities. Mom, did you go to my workplace? I did. I admitted without apology, not to harm your career, but to ensure there were appropriate consequences. What you and Nancy did wasn't just hurtful, it was wrong. Rather than anger, Thomas showed surprising relief. You're right. It was wrong. I've been doing a lot of wrong things for a long time, Mom. I've let Nancy control almost everything in our marriage because it seemed easier than fighting. When she gets upset, it can last for days or weeks, and I just wanted peace. Even at the cost of your relationship with me? With your own self-respect. His eyes filled with tears again. I didn't see it clearly until now. When I read that list of rules she wrote, Mom, I felt sick. I would never consciously agree to those restrictions, but somehow I've been living them anyway. No reminiscing about my childhood? No discussions about having children? These aren't normal boundaries. I reached across the table to take his hand. Thomas, I want you to be happy. I've always wanted that. But this doesn't sound like happiness. It's not, he confessed. I've been walking on eggshells for years. Do you know we haven't visited Ohio because Nancy says there's nothing worth seeing there? That I had to fight for weeks just to call you on your birthday last year? That I have to delete your text messages so she won't see them and get upset. Each revelation was a fresh wound, but also a confirmation that my son hadn't simply stopped loving me. He'd been isolated by a controlling partner, a sadly common story I'd seen among friends and colleagues over the years. What will you do now? I asked. I honestly don't know. I've suggested couples counseling for years, but Nancy always refuses. She says therapy is for weak people. But after yesterday, I don't think I can go back to the way things were. Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, delving into painful truths about his marriage and my own mistakes in our relationship. I acknowledged that in the past, I had sometimes been overprotective or offered unsolicited advice that might have frustrated them both. But that never justified locking you in a basement, Thomas insisted. Nothing could justify that. As we prepared to leave, Thomas asked hesitantly, would you consider staying in Denver a few more days? Not at our house, obviously, but maybe we could spend some real time together. The request warmed my heart. I'd like that very much. Later that afternoon, Rachel Martin and I were surprised by a knock at their door. Patricia and William Baker stood on the porch looking solemn. "We hope to speak with Elizabeth," Patricia explained. "If that's all right." Over tea in Rachel's living room, Nancy's parents expressed their profound apologies again. "We've been reflecting on Nancy's behavior," Patricia said. "This controlling tendency didn't develop overnight. We see now that we may have enabled it by always giving in to her stronger personality." William nodded sadly. "We thought we were supporting her ambition and confidence, but somewhere along the line, it became something uglier." "Has Nancy shown any remorse?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "She's angry right now," Patricia admitted, "mainly at being caught and confronted. But we've made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable, and that there will be consequences to her relationship with us if she doesn't address these issues. We're not asking you to forgive and forget," William added. "Just know that we stand with you on this, Elizabeth. What happened to you will not be brushed aside in our family." Their solidarity was unexpected but deeply appreciated. As they were leaving, Patricia handed me an envelope. "Nancy may not be ready to apologize properly, but we wanted you to have this." Inside was a check for $1,000 with, "for extended hotel stay and travel changes," written in the memo line. While money couldn't heal the emotional damage, the gesture acknowledged the practical impact of the situation. The following evening, Thomas called again, his voice more animated than I'd heard in years. "Mom, something big happened. Nancy came home to get more clothes, and we ended up having another huge argument. But this time, instead of giving in, I stood my ground. I told her I wouldn't accept her controlling behavior anymore. That what she did to you opened my eyes to patterns in our marriage." "How did she respond?" I asked, both proud of and concerned for him. "At first, terribly. She threw things, accused me of never loving her. But then something shifted. She broke down crying, really crying. Not the manipulative tears I've seen before. She admitted she's always been terrified of losing me, that she sees any other relationship in my life as a threat. It was the first hint of genuine insight I'd heard about Nancy. That sounds like a breakthrough, even if a painful one." "It felt different," Thomas agreed. "For the first time, we talked about her seeing a therapist. Not couples counseling yet, but individual therapy for her insecurity and control issues. She's resistant but considering it." "That's a positive step," I acknowledged cautiously. "She also said something about wanting to apologize to you, though I don't know if she's ready yet. I told her any reconciliation would have to be on your terms, not hers." The next day, I received a text from Nancy, the first direct communication since the confrontation. "I'm sorry for the basement incident. It was inappropriate." While hardly effusive, it represented more accountability than I'd expected from her. I replied simply, "Thank you for acknowledging that. I hope you'll get the support you need." Over the following days, Thomas and I rebuilt some of our connection through long walks, museum visits, and honest conversations, all on neutral territory. He revealed more about his unhappiness in the marriage and his struggle to balance loyalty to his wife with his own needs and family ties. "The hardest part is realizing how much I've lost," he confessed during a walk through a city park. "Not just with you, Mom, but with myself. I used to have opinions, preferences, friends. Somehow that all got whittled away to keep the peace." By the end of the week, Nancy had returned home, and Thomas reported they were having difficult but necessary conversations about their future. Whether their marriage would survive remained uncertain, but Thomas was finding his voice again. A victory regardless of the outcome. I extended my stay in Denver by another week, accepting the Bakers' financial assistance to cover the additional hotel nights. While I never returned to Thomas and Nancy's house, Thomas and I met daily, rebuilding our bond through simple activities and long overdue conversations. "I found those photo albums you brought," Thomas mentioned during lunch at a small diner. "Nancy had put them in a closet without showing me. Looking at them last night, Mom, I'd forgotten so much about our life together. Remember that camping trip when it rained for 3 days straight, and we played cards in the tent? And you beat me at gin rummy for the first time." I smiled, heart warming at the shared memory. "You were so proud." I was 11 and thought I was the smartest person alive, he laughed. You let me believe it too. These moments of reconnection were healing for both of us. Thomas seemed to grow more relaxed and confident with each passing day, as if reclaiming pieces of himself long suppressed. Nancy remained mostly in the background of our reconciliation, though Thomas kept me updated on their progress. She had reluctantly agreed to 3 therapy sessions, and while Thomas reported she was resistant to the process, the therapist had apparently named her controlling behaviors directly, which felt like validation. The therapist asked about her childhood and relationship with her parents, Thomas explained. Apparently there's a lot there about never feeling good enough, always having to be perfect. It doesn't excuse what she did to you, but it helps me understand her better. Near the end of my second week in Denver, Nancy reached out again, asking if I would meet her for coffee alone. After consulting with Thomas and Rachel, I agreed, choosing a public cafe for the encounter. Nancy arrived punctually, dressed more casually than I'd ever seen her, her usual perfect appearance slightly subdued. She seemed unsure how to greet me, ultimately offering an awkward handshake. Thank you for meeting me, she began stiffly. This isn't easy for me. I appreciate you suggesting it, I replied neutrally. After ordering, Nancy took a deep breath. I want to apologize properly for what happened. The basement situation was completely unacceptable. I was cruel and I'm sorry. The words seemed rehearsed but genuine. Thank you, Nancy. May I ask why? Why you felt that was necessary? She stared into her coffee. I've been asking myself the same question in therapy. The honest answer isn't flattering. I've always felt threatened by your relationship with Thomas. He speaks about you with such admiration, and I never had that with my parents. They loved me, but their approval always came with conditions: perfect grades, perfect appearance, perfect career. So you wanted to minimize my influence? I suggested. Yes, she admitted. I thought if I could control how much access you had to our lives, I could ensure you wouldn't undermine me. It sounds paranoid saying it out loud. It does, I agreed. I've never wanted anything but happiness for Thomas, which includes his marriage. I'm beginning to see that, she said quietly. The therapist says I have severe insecurity and control issues that I've never addressed. That doesn't excuse locking you in the basement, but it helps explain why I felt so desperate to maintain control. While her apology didn't erase the hurt, it represented significant progress. We spoke for nearly an hour, establishing cautious common ground and tentative boundaries for moving forward. I can't promise I'll change overnight, Nancy concluded, but I am trying to understand why I act this way and how to stop it. Thomas deserves better, and honestly, so do I. Living in constant fear of losing control is exhausting. As my extended visit neared its end, Thomas and I had one final dinner together. He seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted. Nancy and I have a long road ahead, he admitted. But for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. We're talking about real issues instead of pretending everything's perfect. And how are you feeling about everything? I asked. Stronger, he replied thoughtfully. Standing up to Nancy was terrifying at first, but each time it gets easier. I'm remembering who I am outside of her expectations. Before departing for the airport the next morning, I received a small package delivered to the hotel. Inside was a framed photo of Thomas as a child that I'd brought as a gift, now properly displayed in a new silver frame, along with a note from Nancy. This belongs on our mantel. Thank you for raising such a wonderful son. It was a small gesture but symbolically significant. My son's face would no longer be hidden away in their home. The flight back to Ohio gave me time to reflect on the tumultuous 2 weeks. What had begun as a nightmare had transformed into an unexpected catalyst for growth and honesty. I had stood my ground with dignity, and relationships that seemed broken beyond repair were beginning the slow process of healing. Back home, I resumed my quiet life of gardening, volunteering, and book club, but with a newfound sense of empowerment. I had faced cruelty and responded not with matching hostility but with firm boundaries and self-respect. 2 months later, Thomas called with news. He and Nancy had separated. It's temporary, he explained. Her therapist suggested it as part of her treatment for control issues. We're still committed to working things out, but we both need space to grow individually first. During their separation, Thomas began visiting Ohio regularly, staying in my guest room like old times. With each visit, I saw more of the authentic son I'd raised, thoughtful, kind, with a ready laugh that had been absent for too long. By Christmas, Nancy had completed 3 months of intensive therapy, and she and Thomas were cautiously reuniting with new boundaries and communication patterns. When they called together on Christmas morning, Nancy surprised me with an invitation. "We'd like you to visit again in the spring, Elizabeth. The guest room upstairs will be ready for you." The healing wasn't instantaneous or complete, but it was real and ongoing. The basement incident, while painful beyond words, had ultimately forced truth into relationships long clouded by fear and control. Sometimes it takes darkness to appreciate the light. Thomas visits monthly now, sometimes with Nancy, sometimes alone. Our relationship has found a new rhythm based on mutual respect, rather than obligation. During his last visit, we spent an afternoon going through old photo albums, laughing and sometimes crying over memories long suppressed. "I missed this so much, Mom," he confessed. "Just being able to talk about our past without feeling guilty or anxious." Nancy continues her therapy diligently, though her progress comes in fits and starts. During her last visit, she asked about my teaching career, showing genuine interest for the first time. "Thomas says you were beloved by your students," she remarked. "That must have been rewarding." These small moments of connection feel like miraculous gifts after years of distance. The road to healing hasn't been straightforward. There have been setbacks. A tense phone call when old patterns resurfaced. A difficult Thanksgiving when Nancy felt overwhelmed by family dynamics. But unlike before, these challenges are now addressed openly rather than buried beneath polite pretense. Thomas and Nancy ultimately decided to continue their marriage, but with significant changes. Thomas started his own therapy to address the patterns that allowed him to accept mistreatment. They established what they call relationship reset rules, guidelines for communication and boundaries that honor both their needs. The therapist says our marriage needed to completely break before it could be rebuilt healthier, Thomas explained during a recent visit. That basement incident was the breaking point that forced us to face everything wrong between us. My relationship with Nancy will likely never be warm and intimate, but it has evolved into something respectful, and occasionally even pleasant. During their spring visit, I stayed in their actual guest room, was included in family meals, and even helped Nancy plant a vegetable garden in their backyard. "I never had someone teach me practical things growing up," she admitted while we dug in the soil together. "My mother hired people for that. There's something satisfying about growing things yourself." These moments of genuine connection feel like small miracles after where we began. My own growth has been equally significant. The woman who climbed through that basement window was different from the one writing this today. I've learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all, it's fear or obligation masquerading as devotion. True love requires enough respect to stand firm when necessary. Inspired by my experience, I joined a support group for older women navigating family conflicts. The stories I heard there of manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional abuse confirmed that my situation, while painful, wasn't unique. Many women my age struggle with adult children and in-laws who discount their worth and autonomy. What began as support-seeking transformed into support-giving. I now co-facilitate the group, sharing my story as an example of how establishing boundaries can ultimately heal relationships, rather than destroy them. You can love someone deeply while still requiring basic respect, I tell the newcomers with trembling voices and tear-filled eyes. I've also returned to teaching in a new capacity, volunteering at an adult literacy program in my community. Using skills honed over 35 years in the classroom, I help adults learn to read and write, finding renewed purpose in their achievements. When a 60-year-old grandmother recently read a story to her grandchild for the first time, her joy reminded me why I became a teacher originally. Thomas has found his voice in other relationships too, reconnecting with college friends Nancy had deemed unsuitable, and pursuing hobbies she had discouraged. He recently joined a local theater group, something he'd loved in high school but abandoned during his marriage. "Mom, I forgot who I was for a while," he told me after his first performance. "I'm remembering now, piece by piece." Nancy's journey has perhaps been the most challenging. Confronting the roots of her controlling behavior meant facing painful truths about her upbringing and self-worth. During a recent phone call, she shared a breakthrough from therapy. "I always thought love was conditional," she explained hesitantly, "that people only stayed if you controlled every variable perfectly. Learning to trust that Thomas won't leave just because he has other relationships in his life. It's the hardest thing I've ever done." The basement incident, while traumatic, ultimately forced truth into the light where it could be addressed. Had things continued as they were, with increasing isolation and control, I might have eventually lost Thomas completely. Instead, that dark moment became a catalyst for authentic healing. This experience taught me that forgiveness isn't forgetting or pretending harm never occurred. Real forgiveness acknowledges the full truth of what happened, while choosing to move forward without bitterness. I've forgiven Thomas and Nancy not because they deserve it, but because carrying anger would only diminish my own life. The most profound lesson, though, has been about dignity. At 67, I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to say, "This is not acceptable. I deserve better." That lesson has transformed not just my family relationships but how I move through the world, with confidence that my voice matters, my boundaries deserve respect, and my worth is inherent. If you're watching this and facing disrespect or mistreatment from family members, please know that establishing boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. Have you ever had to stand up to family for your own well-being? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button to help others find this message of healing and dignity. Remember, it's never too late to require respect, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say, "No more." Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in your own.